The villagers turned away as she passed, their voices dropping to hushed whispers. Their fear clung to the air like thick smoke. No one spoke to her, but their silence screamed a warning. She had come to the house that no one dared to enter. Dust lay thick over the furniture, untouched for years, yet the air was heavy, charged with something unseen. It did not feel empty. The wooden bed against the far wall stood larger than it should have, old-worn, as if it had been waiting. The village chief arrived at her door, his voice firm but low. "Never look under the bed. Promise me." His face was unreadable, his eyes searching hers for something she did not understand. She said nothing. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, soft, trembling. "No matter what happens, do not look under the bed." It had been the last thing she ever said. She had never explained. Never given answers. Only that one warning, heavy with fear. The letter left behind held no secrets. The ink bled across the page, blurred, unreadable. Nothing but empty words, lost to time. No one had asked if she would obey. No one had given her a choice. The first night, the walls sighed around her. The air shifted, thick with something unseen. The silence pressed against her ears, too deep, too loud. Then, a whisper. A voice that did not belong to the wind called her name from beneath the bed. Scratches followed, slow, deliberate, nails dragging against the wood. She pulled the blanket higher, gripping it tight. The candle flickered, its flame bending toward the shadows. The air felt wrong, as though unseen eyes traced her every breath. Even with her eyes shut, she knew she was not alone. The whispers grew louder, night after night. They pressed into her mind, pulling her toward the bed. She curled beneath the blanket, hands pressed over her ears. It did not help. The silence around the whispers made them worse. They begged her to listen, to answer. What if it was nothing? What if it was something? The more she ignored it, the worse it became. Curiosity and fear wrestled inside her. One night, curiosity won. The house held its breath. The air no longer moved. The walls no longer sighed. She crept toward the bed, heart pounding like a drum. A slow breath escaped her lips as she leaned down. Cold air curled against her skin, colder than it should have been. And then, in the darkness, eyes stared back. Wide. Unblinking. Familiar. Her breath caught, her scream rising before she even understood what she had seen. A face. A face she knew. A face that should not have been there. The villagers remembered the woman who once lived there, but not with kindness. Whispers followed her name, always spoken in low voices, as if saying it too loudly might wake something that should remain asleep. Her house stood alone at the edge of the village, its walls cracked, its windows blind with dust. Yet, the air inside did not feel empty. No one had stepped through its doors in years. No one had dared. Until now. Shadows stretched long across the hallway as if they carried old secrets. The past did not die here. It waited. Her mother had chosen silence. She had walked away from this village and never spoken of what she left behind. Questions about childhood had always been brushed aside. Answers had been short, careful, unfinished. But silence does not erase the past. Now there was no more running. No more pretending. The past had pulled her back. And if she wanted to understand, she would have to dig through what had been buried. The villagers did not welcome her. Old women turned their backs, their hands tightening around their walking sticks. Their whispers followed her, too soft to catch, but heavy with meaning. Men walked faster when they saw her, their heads down, as if afraid to meet her eyes. The name of the woman who lived in that house still carried weight. But it was not the weight of respect. It was the weight of fear. A voice, barely a breath, slipped through the air. That house is cursed. Then silence. A wrinkled hand reached for hers, cold and trembling. The grip was strong, desperate. A voice that had lived too long spoke, urgent and afraid. You must leave. Before it's too late. Lips pressed together, fighting against words that had been locked away for years. The struggle did not last long. Fear won. Listen to me. The voice shook. No matter what happens, never look under the bed. The key felt too heavy for its size, its metal cold even in the warmth of her palm. The lock gave way with a soft click. The drawer slid open, revealing a book covered in dust. Leather cracked beneath her fingers as she traced its surface. The pages inside were yellowed with time, but the words had not faded. The writing was sharp, each letter deliberate, each word a whisper from the past. The first entry sent a chill down her spine. Whatever is under the bed must never be set free. The air shifted. Cold, heavy, unnatural. The walls did not move, yet something in the room felt different. The weight of something unseen pressed down, thick like mist. Silence lingered too long, stretching beyond its place. A breath quickened. A glance darted around. The feeling of being watched clung to the skin like damp cloth. No matter where the eyes turned, the unease remained. Then, beneath the bed, something flickered. 2 bright orbs, unblinking, deep in the shadows. Waiting. Watching. A sharp gasp filled the air. The body jerked back, heart pounding. The eyes did not move. They did not blink. They only stared. Footsteps echoed softly, but only one set belonged to the person walking. The weight of an unseen presence pressed against the back, following, mirroring every move. The corners of the house darkened, even when the light touched them. Shadows stretched too far, shifting in ways they should not. At night, the bed trembled. Just slightly. A shudder beneath the weight of something that was not there. The sound of scratching filled the silence, faint but steady. Fingernails dragging against wood. Slow. Deliberate. Sleep came uneasily. The moment the eyes shut, the world changed. The air thickened, heavy like water. A voice called from nowhere and everywhere. Soft, sorrowful. A name whispered, over and over. A woman stood in the distance. Her face was familiar, yet unknown. The shape of her eyes, the tilt of her mouth. It was like looking into a reflection warped by time. The voice trembled. A warning. A plea. You must leave before it takes you too. Darkness swallowed the words. And then, silence. Fingers brushed against rough wood. A slight pressure, and the plank beneath shifted. A space hidden away, untouched by time. A folded paper lay within, its edges browned, its ink faded but not gone. The words formed in shaky strokes, but the warning remained sharp. A voice from the past, speaking across years. If she ever returns, she must never look under the bed. The last sentence sent chills down the spine. If she does, it will find her. Hands trembled against the door handle. A sharp pull. A twist. Nothing. The door should have opened. The lock was gone, but the wood would not budge. A rush into the open air. A desperate voice, pleading, begging. But the villagers turned away. Heads lowered, feet shuffled. No one met the eyes filled with fear. A single whisper, barely audible. It's too late now. The whispers returned, no longer soft, no longer distant. They grew louder, rising, surrounding from all sides. A breath caught. A sharp inhale. The sound was wrong. A clawed hand slithered from beneath the bed. Long, bony fingers stretched forward, curling, grasping. The darkness moved. It stretched, twisted, pulling itself upward. A shape rose. A shadow, shifting into something more. Breath hitched. Heart stopped. It had been waiting. And now it was here. The darkness shifted. The air thickened. A slow, crawling movement disturbed the silence. From beneath the bed, a shape slithered forward. Its limbs stretched too far, its motions wrong, jerky, unnatural. The room seemed to shrink as it rose, unfurling from the shadows like a forgotten nightmare. Then, the face appeared. The breath caught. The eyes staring back were familiar, too familiar. The features were the same, yet twisted, stretched into something hollow and hungry. A whisper, soft and crawling, slithered through the air. The voice was known, a perfect mimic of the past. A name, spoken as though from another world. The truth settled like ice. The missing mother was never missing. She had been taken. The shape standing before her was not a stranger. It had worn another face before. A face she once loved. The weight of realization crushed down, suffocating. This thing had been waiting. It had always been waiting. A whisper from the dark. A truth that burned. This was not just a nightmare. It was a curse, passed down, waiting for the next. If she did not escape, she would take her mother's place. The walls stretched. The floor twisted. The house no longer obeyed its own rules. Steps hurried, desperate, but the hallways curled in on themselves. Doors vanished before they could be reached. The creature did not chase. It did not need to. It stood, waiting, its voice creeping through the air. Come, my child. The walls pulsed. The darkness swelled. The house was no longer a house. It was something else, something alive. The diary lay open, pages fluttering in the unseen wind. A final chance, a last hope. Fingers fumbled, turning brittle paper, searching, pleading. The last entry loomed before her. The only way to defeat it is to remember its name. The breath stilled. The hands shook. The name was missing. Torn away. A whisper stirred in the chaos. A voice, distant yet close. A memory, buried but not lost. The last words of a mother, spoken in fear, now echoed in the mind of a daughter. Do not forget who you are. Something clicked. A single word, once forgotten, now returned. A name. The scream tore through the air. A name, sharp as a blade, thrown into the abyss. The creature recoiled, its form shuddering. The whispering stopped. The air cracked. The figure writhed, its shape twisting, fighting. A howl, raw and broken, filled the house. The shadows trembled. The darkness retreated. The curse was breaking. The floor cracked. The walls groaned. The weight lifted. The creature collapsed, its form unraveling, dissolving into nothing. Silence followed. A deep, ringing silence. The door creaked open. The whispers were gone. She was free. The house stood still, holding its silence. No more whispers, no more shadows. The air had lost its weight, the walls no longer stretched with unseen horrors. The village held its breath. No one dared step forward, not at first. Then, the elders arrived. Their eyes, filled with questions, scanned the house that had once held so much fear. One of them stepped forward, voice steady. You have done what no one else could. A glow flickered in the corner, soft and warm, a presence not of this world. A voice, gentle yet distant, floated through the air. You freed me, my child, but I cannot stay. The words carried sorrow, but also peace. A mother's voice, filled with love, yet fading. Understanding settled like a stone. The battle had been won, but some things could never be undone. The past had been severed, but the price of truth was loss. The spirit faded, a presence slipping back into the place where it had been trapped for so long. The diary lay heavy in her hands. Its cover, worn with time, still carried the dust of secrets long hidden. Fingers brushed across the leather. Pages filled with warnings, stories left untold. I will never forget, came the whisper. The drawer slid shut. The past sealed once more. Some things were meant to remain untouched. The air was lighter now. The weight had lifted. No more whispers. No more scratches in the dark. The bed stood quiet. Nothing stirred beneath it. For the first time, the house was just a house. The battle had ended in the shadows, but the memory would never fade. A key turned. A final act. The lock clicked into place, sealing the house, the history, the curse. From a distance, eyes watched. The villagers stood, unsure. Some nodded, their faces filled with quiet respect. Others whispered, their fear not yet gone. The past had left a scar. A wind rose, carrying something soft, something familiar. A whisper barely heard, yet unmistakable. Thank you, Adana. Steps did not falter. The path stretched ahead, the village behind. The past belonged to the house. The journey belonged to her. She did not look back. The warnings had been there from the start. Whispers from villagers, words scribbled in a diary, a mother's final plea. Stay away. Do not look. Never lift the veil of what was hidden. Yet curiosity had pulled her forward, leading her where she was never meant to go. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Some truths should never be known. Fear had tried to teach this lesson. The cold breath in the night, the shifting shadows, the voice calling from the darkness. It had all been a warning. A reminder that not everything should be found. But curiosity had won. The past was no longer a mystery. The face in the darkness had been unmasked. The whispers had names now. There was no going back. The world she once knew had changed. The innocence of not knowing, the comfort of ignorance, it was gone. She had lost. She had gained. A mother who could never return. A childhood swallowed by fear. A home that no longer belonged to her. But there was freedom too. The weight of lies had been lifted. The unseen hands that once pulled her back had disappeared. She had walked through the dark and come out on the other side. The whispers had stopped. The house stood silent. 4 generations, it had claimed others. It had called for more. Now, it would call no longer. She had not been the next victim. She had been the end. The cycle, the curse, the fear, it stopped with her. Not all monsters hide in the dark. Some are buried in history. In stories left untold. In warnings that go unheard. The past still whispered, but it no longer had power. She would not fear it anymore. Some names should never be spoken again. She walked away, leaving the past behind, knowing that some secrets should stay buried.